Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. I'm excited to be here with you today. And today is really special because it's Christmas morning, 2025. And I don't normally like to date these episodes because I want them to be evergreen and people can pull them up at any time. But this is just a special time, and I'm really thankful. I'm really excited about this time and to celebrate, the birth of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And I don't mind saying that at all. So I'm excited about today, and I'm just thankful. I have a lot to be thankful for. I'm thankful for this year and in getting through another year and just being at the end of another year and at the beginning of a new year coming forward. But I don't have a lot of notes today. I'm not trying to teach you anything. I'm not trying to land a big point. I've just been looking at my life lately, and I felt like talking out loud, not judging it, not fixing it, just noticing it. And I think there are a lot of people who get to a place in life where you start doing that. You stop rushing past your own story. You stop trying to outrun the questions, and you finally sit still long enough to really, really hear the questions that are going on in your mind. So letting people overhear your thinking feels different than trying to explain something. I've always been someone who thinks a lot. I've just always been in my thoughts from a childhood, just been in my thoughts, and that really goes way back. I wasn't the loud kid. I wasn't the one jumping into every conversation that I observed, and because I did observe, and the fact is I processed a lot, and I was very very quiet. I was sort of an introvert, and I had a lot of thinking going on in my mind. I was very shy, and just didn't want to speak out loud. But I did have a kind of a knack for figuring things out internally, and I could logically think about different things in different ways. And it's interesting that I was able to think about things so logically in some cases, but in more complex things, I may not have processed things the way I wanted to. Somewhere along the way, that uh, processing it turned into this idea that I had things figured out even before I spoke sometimes, but uh, I was so shy and sometimes insecure that I was afraid to even say what I was thinking because I wasn't sure that I was going to be right. But here's something that I'm learning now, and that is that you don't have to finish thoughts to have honest ones. You don't have to have everything all figured out. All right. So today I'm just going to let you overhear a little of me thinking. That could be dangerous. Okay. But looking at your whole life instead of one chapter changes what you notice. When you pull back far enough and look at your whole life, patterns start to show up. You see seasons you rushed through and moments that you didn't realize were actually shaping you, decisions that felt small at the time but ended up redirecting everything. And some things mattered more than I knew, some things mattered less than I thought they would. And I don't feel regret as much as I feel awareness. Some regrets, but a lot of awareness and reflection used to feel like dissatisfaction to me in every case. For many years, sometimes even still, but now it really feels like respect for the life that I've lived. And so I started this podcast because I I've lived, in my opinion, a long life, and I hope I still have a lot more to live. But I've had experiences and in situations, I felt like, I mean, have you ever noticed somebody under a viaduct or a bridge or on the side of the road in a tent or something, and you wondered what was that life all about? And I know that there's more to it than that. And I just always believe that there is something more to people's lives and what's the story behind those lives. And I, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you've just looked at your life and looked at situations and just said, so is this it? Is this it? You know, you wonder if there's more to life than just what you see on the surface. And I often did that, and I wanted to make sure that my life mattered, that I mattered, and that I left something that actually mattered. You see, so I just wanted to make sure that I'm leaving something and to my children, to my grandchildren, and to other people and their experiences in life that people need to know about, need to be aware of, need to think about, to count the lessons in your life or the experiences in your life as lessons. And I know that everything I like to think of everything as in dots and lines. And so every dot in your life leads to a line that leads to a dot and so forth. And so I just want people to think about it. So the three things that this podcast hinges on is life lessons. So I want us to think about the incidents and accidents and occurrences and so forth in our lives as not just things, but as lessons that we can learn from. And the other second area is mindset, because everything centers around mindset and how we think and how we process things. And the other is overcoming limiting beliefs, because I had so many limiting beliefs that I had to address and seek to overcome in my life. So it's been a journey for me. And I just wanted to give something back in that. And so I learned a lot by doing a lot of things. I worked in a physical job where I had to move about and do things. And those physical jobs taught me lessons that I still apply today. I think a lot about my time working in the warehouse, the heat of it, the cold, and the changes of the seasons, the open space where the wind was blowing in and just numbing my hands, and my hands would lock up sometimes because they would be so cold, and the sound of those conveyor belts that never stopped moving seemingly unless they were jammed. And, manual labor, it teaches you things that office work never will. Your body learns discipline before your mind does sometimes. You learn the rhythms and endurance and consistency. There are days my back hurt more than once, and I still had to show up. There were no shortcuts and not always applause, just work sometimes. But those experiences weren't just jobs. They trained me for life. They taught me that progress often looks like repetition, that discipline is built quietly, that showing up matters more than feeling inspired sometimes. And, and commitment to the task that I was doing really helped to change my energy long before it changed my results. And I learned about commitment and committing myself to things. And so I've always been my own number one project. Now, there was a moment in my life when something shifted internally too. Yes. And that's when I moved from being interested in achieving my objectives to being committed to achieving them. I don't know if you heard that. I moved from being interested in achieving them to being committed to achieving them. And that's where, um, I pushed my life to uh, move into different areas where some things just had to happen. And really, when I made that decision, when that happened, my energy changed, my action changed, my excuses got quieter. A commitment recognizes and reorganizes your priorities without you announcing it. Discipline stopped feeling like punishment when I made commitment. It started feeling like alignment. When commitment shows up, motivation becomes optional. So the shift didn't make things easier, it made things clearer. being in rooms where you feel out of place uh, comes into play in some of those things in my life as well, because I did, even when I made commitments to move forward and to do things, those commitments took me into rooms, into spaces that were probably sometimes bigger than me. And, being in rooms where you feel out of place can be exactly where you belong, though. I remember being in rooms where people were smarter than me, sometimes more successful than me, making more money than me. And I remember thinking, man, I'm way out of my league. I don't belong here. The worst thing that I could have done was fake it, because people know your conversation gives you away, your actions give you away. But I came to realize later that those rooms weren't mistakes. They were exactly where I needed to be. Being in those spaces didn't diminish me, it stretched me. And growth often feels like discomfort before it feels like confidence. And sometimes the sign that you do belong is that you feel a little out of place. Because when you're in a position where you feel like you're always the dominant person, then you're not in the right space, because you're not in a space where you can grow. And so I needed to be in the spaces where I can grow. And so being in those spaces were really, really, really good for me. And learning how much you don't know is one of the most grounding lessons in life. And one of my greatest lessons came from a simple question. I was at an event. I was very young. I was working in my church, doing the audio and so forth. And my pastor took myself and another gentleman that I was working with to a conference, and the broadcasters conference, and they had all kinds of things going on. That kind of conference today would probably be a podcasters conference or media conference. But I remember sitting down with him, and he said, "So tell me, what have you learned?" And I told him, I learned that I don't know much. And he said, then you learned a lot. That was his wisdom. But that stayed with me, because the more I learned, the more I realized how much I don't know. And that doesn't discourage me, it grounds me. I've always believed I could figure things out, not because I knew everything, but because I stayed teachable. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's staying open. And that's what I've done, is try to be teachable. Sometimes, now I got to admit that I had to break some paradigms, because I did get into some of those spaces where I thought, listen, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And sometimes I was challenged by some of the things that were before me to learn, because sometimes things didn't click in my head. And when I tried and tried and it didn't click, I would get frustrated and I would back off. But I always had a curiosity to learn more and to be more, to do more. And so I would push past those things, and so I learned about stories and had to push myself to be vulnerable. I always had stories going on inside of me, but just telling those stories required a lot of vulnerability, and not polished vulnerability. And I've learned about storytelling. I've learned that storytelling requires vulnerability, and you can't tell the truth from a safe distance. Real stories expose some uncertainties that we face, and not just outcomes, but they show process. And I didn't always know how to say things. Um, I knew how to, I keep saying this, I think I knew how to figure some things out. You wouldn't think it sometimes with some of the challenges that I deal with in everyday life. But uh, because sometimes, I'm in praying, God, I can't figure this out. Please help me to figure this one out, and show me the direction. But I don't know. Sometimes the words only come after the meaning forms in your mind. Oh, but in the meantime, there's silence, and that doesn't mean emptiness. Sometimes it means something is still just becoming clear to you. And uh, I learned also about the difference in performance, and process and so forth. And because I think that I felt like performance was essential at one time because I was in an operations management type of a situation and everything was about performance. When they sit down with you, they gave you a performance review. And so everything was about performance. But as I learned to let go of performance, I realized that it makes room more so for my belief. And I realized something about myself recently. I've been trying to perform, but belief doesn't require performance. There are things I can't do on my own, and I don't need to pretend that I can. And faith for me has become less about striving and more about trusting. And I can show up, I can do my part, but I don't have to carry everything. And that's freedom in knowing where responsibility ends. God gives me awareness for the people and things around me now and vision for what's ahead. Time feels different when purpose becomes the feel, and the filter. And so as I look at purpose over performance, you know, time feels different now. Slower in some ways, more precious in others. To still be relevant and productive doesn't feel like ambition anymore. It feels like purpose. The question I ask myself now is simple. Is what I'm doing amplifying the quality of life for others and myself? Productivity without purpose feels empty. Purpose without presence feels incomplete. Slow time isn't wasted time, it's where meaning shows up. And it was hard for me to take, it's interesting because it was hard for me to take slow time, but I could waste time, like scrolling or something like that. And I had to come to the realization we have to think, look, we need to slow down, not to scroll, but to process, to think, to meditate, to pray, all right, to look at ourselves, see, and seeing life sometimes through your children's eyes reframes everything. I think a lot about how my children see the world, or how they saw the world coming up, and my grandchildren now, and how they see the world and how they see me. I try to look at life through their eyes sometimes, and what will they remember? Not my titles, not my accomplishments, but my presence, my patience, how I showed up. That's the part of life that lingers. I remember my adult daughter saying to me, even when we were in after a situation where her mom and I weren't together anymore, and years later, one of the greatest things that she said to me is that she said, "Dad, I'm thankful that you were never an absentee father," and that meant a lot to me to hear that. And so uh, things like that and things like this are reasons that I sit down here, and recording moments helps gratitude stay alive. I've come to understand the power of recording moments. I didn't want to do it. I mean, I know we took photos, we do memories, but recording moments and uh, doing this podcast and recording times and not just taking photographs, but videos, photos with my kids, videos with my grandchildren, moments you don't realize are memories yet, but reviewing them regularly changes perspective. And so I encourage you to pull out the old photo album if you got it, if you got a digital one, or pull out the videos and look at them with your family because it does change perspective. And gratitude grows when it's practiced. And you see, memory fades when it's ignored. And there's something powerful about memorializing what matters, not just alone, but together. Life feels richer when you remember it intentionally. And mentorship matters more than most men are willing to admit, also. And so when I think about how I may have wanted to give something to my children and my grandchildren, I think about men, which a lot of this audience or these listeners are, are men, and uh, sometimes we just don't realize how much mentorship matters and associations matter, and maybe it matters more than most of us are willing to admit. And I didn't get here by myself. I didn't get through life by myself. Mentors matter, especially for guys like me. And men need voices they trust and examples they can see, wisdom that isn't performative. Mentorship doesn't make you smaller, it gives you shoulders to stand on and to stand beside. And then next to that is contribution. It's being able to give something back, because contribution matters uh, even more than just being known. I'd rather be a contributor than a celebrity in any way. I've thought about what my claim to fame is, and the older I get, the less that phrase matters. Fame fades, the contribution lasts. And the reason I came to that thought was because when I was in management, and I wanted to move to senior management and beyond on my job. And I kept working at this and working at that. And I said to uh, my director, what do I need to do to make this happen? And he said, well, here's maybe do this and do that, but tell me, what's your claim to fame? And I said, well, I don't know, you know. And he said, well, you need to know. And so I began looking for projects and things that needed to be done. And I know now what it is, but I mean, what I was looking for, but I didn't know then that what I was looking for was the gap and something that needed to be fulfilled. And that's the thing in business and life, is if you can find a gap and fulfill it, you can ha- have a different state in life. You can maybe become very wealthy. You can have a lot of success, or even just a lot of fulfillment. And sometimes there's a gap, a lot of gaps in places where contribution comes in, and contribution lasts. I don't need to be known by everyone. I need to be faithful to what I was given. A footprint shows where you've been. A fingerprint proves you were there. And I want to leave both quietly and honestly. And look, this isn't a conclusion. It's a pause. I'm not trying to summarize my life today. I'm just taking a moment to notice it. This isn't a conclusion. It's a pause, and sometimes a pause tells you more than a plan ever could. I just wanted to just kind of pour a little myself out in a different way. This is probably one of the first times I've done a podcast in this way. But I just wanted to pour something out and just kind of just talk to you a little bit. I'm excited about what's possible. I'm excited about what's ahead. There's a lot going on right now in our world, in our societies. There's a lot going on, and so it's a great time to be alive today. Uh, some people would say it's a terrible time, um, but I think it's a matter of perspective. There are some terrible things that are going on in our world, but at every stage of our life and every civilization, there's always been something great and something terrible that has happened. But I think that we're in a time and a moment where we should grasp everything and assess our lives, assess ourselves, assess our direction. Sometimes you know, when I think about people who, especially people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, who are assessing life and where we are. At the end of the year, we start assessing things. At the beginning of the year, we start trying to make plans for things. So this is a time for reflection. This is a time for stepping back, taking a look at yourself and where you are, where you've been, and where you're going, And look, make some decisions about where you're going, but make some commitments about what we're going to do to get there. Look, today is the first day of the rest of your life. So make it a great day, make it a great life. And until the next time, keep adapting, keep evolving, and keep reaching for those new and higher horizons. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share this podcast with somebody, and leave a comment. I certainly love to hear from you. Take care, take charge. God bless.